Welcome to the book launch of Smarketing Sell Smarter, Not Harder by Peter Strohkorb. My name is Iris Chan, and I'm the marketing director for Asia Pacific and Japan at Seismic. I had a wonderful experience working with Peter on the APAC book launch, so I'm really thrilled to be invited back as the facilitator for today's session. We're all here today because we're looking at different ways to achieve greater revenue results in 2021 and beyond. Well, you've come to the right place because our book author, Peter Strohkorb, is going to share insights on how to break down the silos within different functional teams so we can really supercharge the revenue engine. Now, before we introduce Peter, let me give you a little sneak preview of what's in store for you today. You'll be meeting a stellar lineup of business leaders for our panel discussion, and they bring a wealth of knowledge having worked with different organizations such as ThoughtWorks, Seismic, Hootsuite, CRO Collective, and New Business Strategies. So it's going to be a power-packed session today. We also have some goodies that we're going to give away later in the session, so please stay tuned. And you'll also receive a free book from Peter through email after today's event. Now, with that, I'm going to introduce you to Peter Strohkorb. Peter is one of the most recognized experts in sales and marketing alignment globally, and he's gained a huge amount of experience leading both functions at organizations such as 3M, Canon, and most recently at Dell. I'll now hand it over to Peter, who will share with us why he wrote the book and highlights from his proven methodology. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Iris. Thanks for the introduction. Everybody, good afternoon. Thanks for being here, and it's great to see you. I'm based in Sydney in Australia, but I service a global audience online, as you can tell. And I have to say the sun is only just rising, so the things we do for our American audience, right? All right, so I'm going to get straight into the book itself, and I'm going to talk to you about why I wrote the book and what prompted me to do that. And this is, as Iris was saying, that I worked in some very large organizations, and I always saw how sales talks to the customer and marketing talks to the customer through different channels, but they don't always talk to each other. In fact, I discovered that in some organizations, sales and marketing teams talk more about each other than to each other. And that leads to a whole bunch of complications that can have really bad consequences. For example, here's some of the symptoms of poor sales and marketing collaboration. Now, I'm not planning to read each individual one out to you. You can read those yourself, but you can see that each one of those 10 symptoms that I've shown here can have quite negative consequences on either the organization's finances, the organization's culture, the organization's staff, and let's not forget the customer experience as well. So there is a price to pay for poor sales and marketing collaboration. Now, the reason I wrote the book is that I discovered in all those organizations that this problem of sales and marketing misalignment is ubiquitous. It happens in every organization almost. And one of my Australian clients gave me this really nice line that I keep using, and that is that there's a gap between sales and marketing, and the larger the organization, the larger the gap. And it is really true, because if your marketing team and your sales teams physically sit together, they can actually just lean over the cubicle and talk to each other and sort things out. If they're on another floor, it becomes difficult. If they're in a different building, it becomes difficult. If they're in a different state of the same country, it becomes difficult. If they're in a different country, on a different continent, it becomes even more difficult. And so I found that this problem exists pretty much everywhere in the world, and pretty much in every organization. And I'll give you some examples later on in terms of some small and some large organizations where it's actually occurred and was resolved. But what I found then was that when I did my research is that even though the problem is ubiquitous, there's no common solution to solving it. And so I developed one. And this is what the book is about. It's not about why it makes sense. I think that's been done to death. So we had Philip Kotler and Neil Rackham write a book 14 or 15 years ago now called Ending the War Between Sales and Marketing. And let's face it, there are different ways to describe the relationship between two parties, but war is probably the strongest term in terms of misalignment that you can use. And so they called it a war. They didn't call it a gap or a misalignment. They actually called it a war. But anyway, so we've been talking for decades about why sales and marketing alignment makes sense. What this book is about now, and what's new, is that it actually describes in quite some detail how you go about it and what's the best way to get the conversation started within an organization, how to make the people part of the solution, not part of the problem, stop the finger pointing and get them towards being constructive. Then it talks about who needs to be involved to make it successful and what you need to do to make it last. Because what you don't want is you don't want it to be relying on the heroic efforts of a couple of individuals who, when they leave, the whole thing falls over and stops working. So you need to make it sustainable. So the book is no longer about why. There is some why there, but it tells you in quite some detail about what's in it for you if you do. So the business, the cultural, and other benefits that I'll be talking about in a minute, and exactly step by step what you need to do to make it successful. And then, of course, it's got some examples in there in terms of where it's already worked and the difference that it made. So it's a highly practical book with actionable recommendations and techniques. So the other thing is that I see Gerhard Schwantner is on the call here. Hello, Gerhard. So Selling Power has just bestowed the honor of my book being a highly recommended book for 2021, and that's a great honor. Thank you, Gerhard, for that privilege. It's not just me saying that misalignment is a problem. So this is a report from, I think, 2017 by LinkedIn, who looked into the issue of misalignment between sales and marketing, and they actually put a dollar figure on it. And what LinkedIn says is that in the US alone, every year, the misalignment is a $1 trillion problem. Things fall between the cracks. There's some double handling between the parties. Customers suffer, customer experience suffers, staff suffer, and so on. It's a $1 trillion problem, US dollar problem, in the US alone, let alone the rest of the world. Then my organization did some research in 2014 into 185 B2B organizations. And what we did was we gave the same set of questions to the salespeople and to the marketing people in each of those organizations, and then analyzed the results. And we asked them questions in terms of how well aligned are you? And then we asked them questions in terms of how well is your organization doing financially? And there's a whole report there that I'll make available to you, but the corollary of the report is that those organizations that had poor sales and marketing alignment were twice as likely to suffer financially also. I'll say this again. Those organizations that had poor sales and marketing alignment between them were twice as likely, not 10%, not 20%, but 100% more likely to be suffering financially. So that's very significant. The thing we want to, so let's stop talking about what we don't want. Let's start talking about what we do want. And what we do want is we want to get away from this picture that I showed earlier, where there's a, shall we say politely, communication barrier between the two parties. What we do want to get to is create constructive feedback and communication between these parties here, because if sales talks to the customer and gets feedback from the customer in terms of what they really like about collateral or white papers or content, then why wouldn't sales feed that back to marketing? And so the marketing knows what actually works for the salespeople, and then they can produce more of the things that sales would actually use and things that help actually sales to produce more sales. Then at the same time, marketing talks to the market through newsletters, through the website and through social media, and they get information back from the customer as well through market research and so on, and they want to feed that back to sales so they can have a more engaged conversation with their customers. So the upshot is that it makes total sense that if sales helps marketing to do a better job, then marketing can do a better job for sales, and sales can sell more. And let's not forget that this is not just an internal issue, because we have the third party here in the picture, and that's the customer. And the customer will get a more consistent experience. So because they hear the same story from sales as they see on the website, say, right? So there's not going to be any confusion on the customer end, and you avoid this problem of a confused mind saying no. So because if they hear something different from sales than from marketing, they go, oh, that doesn't make me feel good. I'm going to take my business elsewhere, which is what we want to avoid. So everybody wins if we work together. Sales wins because they make more sales and have a better conversation with the customer. Marketing wins because they can better support sales and become recognized for that for the first time, possibly. And of course, the brand wins as well, because marketing can do a better job here. And let's not forget, the customer wins because they get a nicer customer experience. So it makes total sense all around for these parties to work together. And if they do, then we've got a picture here of 4 different elements in an organization that are benefiting, that are positively affected by the collaboration. So you can see it's the financial benefits, strategic benefits, operational benefits, and cultural benefits. I'm not going to read out the individual bullet points for you, but you can see that each one of those will have a beneficial impact on the organization. So if you can get any one of those, you'd be better off. All right. Now, Altify, I had the UK and Europe book launch last night, my time, so overnight your time. And I had the former CEO and former founder of Altify on the call. And they did a study in 2017 into the impact of alignment, of sales and marketing alignment. And down the bottom there, you can see the URL if you want to just take a screenshot and pull down the report yourself. But the quantified benefits that Altify came up with are on the screen here. Again, not reading them out individually, but I wouldn't be surprised if any one of you would like to have any one of those results in your organization. If you just imagine what difference that could make to your organization, and what benefits it would bring to the organization, to the staff, to the customers, and possibly to you personally as well. So there's a huge benefit in bringing sales and marketing together. Now, when I first researched the book, like I said, I didn't find a unifying method that was generally accepted. I reached out to Neil Rackham, and Neil Rackham is a sales industry legend. He's been around for many decades, and he was the inventor of spin selling, and later founded Miller Hyman as well. And he said this to me, what you see on the screen there. He said, basically, there is no formal methodology that I'm aware of that goes beyond the CEO saying to the head of sales and to the head of marketing, just communicate better. So he actually congratulated me, and I'm super chuffed that an authority like Neil recognized that the method that I'm describing in the book is not only valid, but is, to his knowledge, the only one that actually is practical and works. So I promised to give you some case studies, and I will give you 2 quite different case studies so you can see it, that the methodology that I'm describing in the book, that's marketing, works at both ends of the spectrum, at a smaller startup type company, and then a larger corporate as well. So this is Brent Clark. He's the CEO of WhatBlock, and WhatBlock is a energy advisory company. So what happened was that at the time there was a 2-year-old startup, and the financiers of the startup were getting quite nervous because the promised revenue results hadn't come in, and Brent's chair was starting to be a bit rocky. And he reached out to me and he said, look, we've got this problem that the marketing team creates content and pricing and products, and the salespeople are just not selling it. And so when I looked into this organization, we found that the marketing team was in one city and the salespeople were in a different city, and they basically didn't believe each other. So marketing said, here are your products, here's your pricing, and the salespeople would say, look, it's too expensive, we can't sell that. And So what happened that Brent and I worked together on this. We got the marketing team and the sales team onto the same page. We got them to talk to each other. We got them to actually collaborate. And what happened was that they were able to move into a higher customer segment, so where the margins were better. They were able to sell better, and the upshot, and I love this line that Brent gave me, is that they were able to sell in 2 weeks the same amount of revenue as they had previously produced in 6 months. And this is not a typical case. This is an outlier. But the reason that happened was that the salespeople for the first time sold a big deal to a big customer at high margins at a high ticket price. And because the organization was a startup, they started off from a small base. So relatively, it made a huge difference. And so that's why they got this phenomenal result. But it gave the salespeople the confidence to actually go to a more senior customer segment, to be competent selling and to get the deal and to bring home the bacon. And as a consequence, Brent Clark is still the CEO now, many years later. On the other end of the spectrum, so we've got a $500 million national energy provider. And what happened was that the former CEO, so this is Amy Charles here, who's now the CEO, but the former CEO came to me and he said, there's something screwy going on between my sales and marketing people and I can't put my finger on it. Can you have a look? So we deployed this marketing process, and it turned out that the sales team was totally disconnected from the marketing team. The marketing team felt like they were mushrooms, kept in the dark, and the call center people were on a different in a different location again, and they were only spoken to and not listened to, and so there was a total disconnect between the parties. The culture was terrible, and the results just didn't appear. So what I then said was that you have 3 different managers for 3 different teams who, may or may not be working together really well. It would be really good if because our research, the 2014 research that I talked about earlier, our research showed that having a single head of sales and marketing who is competent in both disciplines is hugely beneficial to Smarketing. And so this CEO hired Amy, whom you see in the picture here, to be the head of sales and marketing. And Amy and I worked together for 6 months. And after 6 months, the staff were super engaged. We had turned the company around, had much more loyal, happier customers. And the fortunes of the company, turned around, and they had their best sales month ever after 6 months of working together. And I'm really happy to say that Amy has since been elevated to be initially the interim CEO when the previous CEO went on to another job. But the board, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, decided that Amy was the right person to lead the organization as a permanent fixture. So really stoked that that we were able to create this result for the organization. So that goes to show that even if you're just a small-ish company, or whether you're multinational or you're corporate, Smarketing actually works. So back to you, Iris.
Thank you so much, Peter, for taking us through the tenets of the book. And I have read the book twice now. And every time I just feel like it's amazing how you've captured the symptoms of disconnects between sales and marketing teams so precisely. And it really resonated a lot with me. So it's time now for our panel discussion. And at the end of the panel, we'll open up the floor for questions from the audience. So please feel free to enter your questions at any time in the chat window. Now, we have some distinguished guests on our panel today. Let's go through each of them. So first, we have Chris Murphy, who's the CEO of ThoughtWorks North America. A former solicitor, Chris started his career in legal and moved through leadership roles in operations, marketing, and business management. He has extensive experience driving business growth in markets across APAC, Europe, and now North America. Next, we have Doug Winter, CEO and co-founder of Seismic. He's my ultimate boss. And Seismic is a market leader in sales enablement platforms. Doug is also the co-founder previously of Objectiva Software Solutions, and he served as COO and GM at EMC Document Sciences until founding Seismic in 2010. In 2019, Doug was also named one of the best CEOs of small and mid-sized companies in the US by Comparably. We also have Heather Cook today, whose most recent role was General Manager at APAC with social media management platform Hootsuite. Heather has over 19 years of experience in sales leadership and executive management at leading tech companies, including Marketo, Oracle, and Dell. Like Chris, Heather has worked across 3 continents, North America, Europe, and APAC. We also have Christine joining us on the panel, Christine Crandell, who's the president of New Business Strategies, a consulting firm helping B2B companies in technology, manufacturing, distribution, and education across the full life cycle of marketing. Christine brings with her 30 years of leadership and pattern recognition that dramatically accelerates the velocity and quality of sales pipeline, marketing programs, as well as customer expectations. Last but not least, let's welcome Warren. So Warren Zenna is the founder of CRO Collective, and Warren specializes in helping B2B companies succeed by ensuring the success of their chief revenue officer. Warren has previously held executive management positions at the world's leading communications and advertising agencies, including Havas and Publicis Group. So without further ado, we're going to get right into the discussion. To all my panelists, my question to you is, what are your key takeaways from Peter's book? And please also share with us any anecdotes or examples in your career where go-to-market teams needed alignment to drive better results, and how the concepts from Peter's book could have been helpful in those situations. So it'll be great to get your thoughts. Let's start with you, Heather, and Doug, you're up next.
Thank you for allowing me to join this amazing opportunity and chat today. It is 6 a.m., 6:23, so apologies if my brain isn't fully functioning. I don't have coffee around me yet, but I do have a beautiful beach, hopefully later out to go check out later today. In my career, I've been extremely lucky and fortunate to, as I was saying to you guys, travel around the entire world and support 4 different regions. And what I found in my career is no matter what country, what department, and what role I've been doing, sales and marketing has been disaligned in every single one. And I wish I could say I was a genius, but most of my successes are from basic foundations, like the things in Peter's book. What I wish I would have had in my career was a framework, a methodology to use and leverage, because every single role in every single department that I've taken on, I've had to create this from scratch. And yes, I've got the job, accomplished, and I've been very successful in my career because of it, but it's taken so much longer to get to where I wanted to be in those departments, in those roles, because I've had to piece those frameworks and methodologies together. So if I would have had something like this to look over and have a plan of execution, that would have helped me not only earn credibility straight away with the company, instead of saying, look, my methodology is great, let me piece it together for you, but also have that framework to share across the departments to be more efficient and achieve success faster. Some of the successes that I've seen in those collaborations is an increased focus, increased win rates, increased ramp time, customer experience. There's an entire domino that starts to fall. So customer experience, revenue, profitability, performance, customer retention, staff retention, and culture. All of these things have been impacted just by the simple act of sales and marketing working together and stopping them from saying sales is lazy, they don't follow up any leads, and marketing gives me crap leads, there's no quality. So just starting those conversations and getting on the same page and alignment has helped me tremendously in my career to be, luckily, number 1 in every single role and every single kind of performance that I've been able to achieve because of stuff like this. And these types of methodologies can extend past the sales and marketing team. But sales and marketing is a great place to start.
Thank you, Heather. What about you, Doug? Any thoughts?
Yeah, greetings from San Diego, everyone. I feel really good about our beaches until, Heather, I saw your beach. So now I'm feeling a little more sheepish, although probably most people on the phone wouldn't complain about ours. You know, I think it's a really interesting topic. Before I dive into kind of my takeaways, one of the things that struck me was the $1 trillion number, right? I mean, that's a number usually associated with federal budgets and deficits, not business. You know, a lot of zeros. And it seems crazy, but at the same time, I think about some of the work that we've done with our customers where we've gotten in early. And a couple of examples jumped into my head. And both the companies will absolutely remain nameless, so that I don't get run out of town. But one company had done a survey year after year of their sellers, and they found that the sellers were really struggling to find content that they needed to facilitate sales cycles, right? And they of course blamed marketing for this. And that's a pretty common story, nothing really exciting about that, until we talked to marketing. And marketing told us that they spent over $850 million each year. So this was a big company, $850 million each year on creating content to support sellers. And of course some other activities as well. But those two things, when you think about them together, it's crazy. This is something that sales is really frustrated at, and at the same time, marketing is clearly doing a lot of work and spending a lot of money on it, right? And when you start to imagine, well, maybe they could find efficiencies to even reduce that by half. Well, you've just made a pretty good sized dent in Peter's and LinkedIn's $1 trillion number. Another customer that I can think of also had done a third-party study before we engaged with them, or they engaged with us, and they found that their sellers had over 160 places that they went to find the content that they were looking for. And you can kind of imagine how that happened, right? Marketing says, oh, we're really focused on product. We're going to go create content to, for every new product, and we're going to put it somewhere. And, well, the current place is kind of a mess, so let's come up with a new place and put it there. And then over time, it just proliferated. And so again, you start to think about just the upkeep, the time and attention and energy that went into both creating and maintaining those 160 different places, but also that was wasted by sellers. And we're talking about 20,000 plus sellers, and very quickly, you make another big dent in that $1 trillion number. So while at first I was kind of staggered as I thought about those examples, it really hit me that, it's probably not crazy kind of numbers. For me, the thing that I took the most out of the book and resonated the most with me was around just how much the customer needs to be in the center of the conversations. Opinions are great. Facts and data coming from the customer themselves really does, drive and answer and break all the ties. So if you're really crisp about really understanding what the customers are saying, and you hear that, I think that really does become the undisputable fact that both teams need to rally around. And then it's having some sort of a process and a methodology to allow you to really agree on what it is that they're saying, which sometimes we have happy ears and we hear what we want to hear from our perspective, not necessarily what is actually being said. But then turning that and transforming it into a language that both teams and everyone, someone on the chat I saw was talking about product. I think it's really important for product too. They're all hearing it and thinking about it and talking about it at the same way and using the same language. And so that, to me, that really resonated. It resonated with my own experiences, both from the customers that we interact with, but also, honestly, and, off the record, we're off the record, right? Within our own organization, right, we also have, really have to adopt that approach and that methodology.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug, for your insights. Now we're going to move over to Chris, and love to hear from you, Chris, what your thoughts are too.
Hi, everyone, and thank you. Well, it feels like a competition for the best beach. I'm in New York City, so I have nothing to offer in that regard. So it's always hard to follow in a panel of esteemed audiences, but with the beach competition, I just feel completely outclassed. But I'll go on and add some observations anyway. There's a few things that really jump out to me, and if I could build upon what Doug was saying, I really agree about the customer-centric approach. It's something that's, I think, close to all of our hearts. Anyone who's involved in sales and marketing must have the customer at the heart. But one of the anti-patterns we see is how often we forget that. And Smarketing is really about, the book is about saying that, take an outside-in approach, start with the customer, align sales and marketing teams around that, and good things will happen. And so, right from the outset, a great insight, a great reminder for all of us there. The second thing that really jumps out for me and that resonated strongly was this, I think, approach you've got in there, Peter, around people first, process second, and tech third. And that's not saying that process and tech aren't important. They're vital. You've got to have them to, particularly in the digital world nowadays. But we've all seen so many instances in which people think that if you buy the right tool, that everything will be fixed, or that if you just put in the right process, that everything will work. And they'll help, but what at the heart of it, the heart of any organization, at the heart of any effective sales and marketing organization is having the right people and having the people aligned around the customers and the right outcome. And so at this stage, I was really starting to get this, this in sync resonance with just everything that's being said, there in the approach. And then, third, building upon that is this approach to engaging those people, that people first approach, and then how you engage them. And, it's not about, the approach is not about telling people what to do. And human psychology tells us what the result of it. None of us like being told what to do, or perhaps it's just me. I definitely don't like being told what to do. But this approach of getting people together in a structured way to determine the problems themselves, to discover the problems themselves, and then determine the solutions, and then start small, see the results, celebrate together, and build upon that. That really resonated with me. And so in terms of, particular anecdotes from my perspective, well, I come from a company, we're a software consultancy, and anyone in software nowadays has a lot to do with agile approaches. And agile approaches at their heart are about harnessing modern software approaches, but they're about breaking down big problems into small, discernible chunks and then delivering on them. And what this approach is about is that it's very similar to that. It's like, how many times have we seen ourselves be paralyzed by just the scale of the problem we have to solve? And we either don't do anything about it because it's just too large to tackle, or we fall for the big multi-year transformation solution, which at the end will get some amazing result for us. And of course, it never does. And what this very practical approach is, it's about, let's start small. Let's think about the biggest problem that we can solve the simplest, and let's do it. And personally, in my experience, that is a really effective approach about how you can really start making tangible steps forward in these trillion-dollar problems.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. And that is so true in terms of, focusing on the people element and the culture element of things, right? Cool. So let's go over to Warren and Christine. I'd love to hear from both of you because you've both worked with, mid-sized companies and growth stage clients. And one of the perceptions out there in the market is that, smaller companies tend to have less of an alignment problem because they probably don't have that many departments and functional teams, and they aren't so big, so they're less complex, they're there are less silos. So what are your thoughts? I'd love to hear from you what observations you've got and, you know, how Peter's recommendations tie in with the environments that you've seen working with different clients. So let's start with you, Warren.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And this has been really insightful. So this is a great topic. And you're correct. You know, there is this perception that smaller organizations don't have this problem. And I guess, I suppose, sure, if you look at it from only a perspective of complexity, but what I would say is that it's not that they don't have the problem. It just may not be as complicated a problem, but it's still a problem. And as a matter of fact, I would say, the problem has as much to do with complex organizations as it does have to do with the way our brains are. And, you know, you still have brains in small companies, right? And so if I have 4 or 5, even maybe 10 people in a company, they still all have brains that have, you know, ways in which they organize things in their heads. And that's how these things start, right? People put things in buckets, they put things in silos because it's just easier to deal with that way. I think it's a lot of this is all just muscle memory stuff. People tend not to think like organizational people. They tend to think just like people, right? And so if I'm building a company, unless I have really strong managerial experience, or I built big businesses, or I have a lot of experience with this and having made these mistakes before, you know, it's particularly a lot of companies are run by CEOs who are engineering people, right? They're product guys, right? They make products and they build things. And so they come to the table with a very different perspective than someone who just builds organizations. As a matter of fact, I would say most companies that are smaller tend not to hire somebody that comes from big organizations. They hire people that build products because that's where usually the company starts from. And that's where a lot of this stuff originates from. So as a matter of fact, I'm sure Christine would agree with me that if I'm going to work with a company that's smaller, I see it as an opportunity to get this before it becomes really bad. Because the earlier you can start to train people to think a certain way, then it's more likely they're going to set the foundation of their company up in a way that's going to mitigate the possibility of this happening down the road when the company does get bigger, right? And it's hard to do because, you know, like any of us, right? It's very difficult for human beings to see complexity before it's complex, right? We're like, it's easy right now. I'm just going to do it the way I want. Leave me alone. And then all of a sudden it gets complicated and they're like, wow, okay. And so, you know, getting somebody to think ahead, this is what Peter's describing here really is long-term thinking. It's not short-term thinking. Right? This is about planning. This is about strategy. It's not about solving problems with Band-Aids. And another challenge with smaller companies, as I'm sure Christine will attest to this, is they're much more frenetic. I mean, these are companies whom are doing more per person than larger companies, right? You've got everyone's doing 3 jobs, 4 jobs. Everyone has multiple responsibilities. The CEO usually is very hands-on, which makes it even harder for any of these people to figure out how to build systems and organizations that require them to step away. So the idea, I think, is to introduce principles early so that the company can look ahead. And it's no different than, and I wish it was this simple, but it's not. If I were to walk up to someone who was driving in an area they never drove before, and I stopped them and I said, get out of the car for a second, I want to show you something. And I open up a map and they look at the road they're on and they see that there's like, you know, a cliff, you know, and a bridge that's broken. You know, they probably wouldn't go that way anymore. They'd probably turn and go a different direction. But if you don't tell them that, they'll go. Even if you tell them anecdotally, they'll still drive that way. They'll want to figure it out for themselves. People love to run through rocks and go over cliffs since they can figure it out themselves. So what you're trying to do in a conversation, the one Peter's presenting, is give them a map to the future so they could see the rocks ahead, right? And maybe make decisions about taking a different path. And that's not easy, right? But that's where the opportunity lies. And I think this is kind of what it becomes very much a founder's problem in an earlier stage company than a complexity one. So I'd leave it at that.
Great. Thank you so much, Warren. And Christine, do you want to weigh in on what Warren's just said?
Yeah, I definitely would want to build upon what Warren said. I think what's interesting when we look at, you know, the problem at a small company and at a large company, and he's right, you know, in a smaller company, everyone's doing 3 jobs. So there's this reliance on past experience and this frenetic, you know, entrepreneurialism to get the job done. It reinforces the gap, and as the company becomes larger, that gap then becomes a function of politics. I think what I find and what I've experienced in aligning sales and marketing is it really does start with language. You have to start small and then build upon it. So understanding language, a lead is what? Literally write it down. What's the definition of a lead? What's the definition of a sales qualified lead? And then I think the other thing where that contributes to it is this mismatch of incentives and metrics and not really understanding common resources. Marketing thinks that sales has free reign, which isn't really the case. And sales think marketing sits on pots of money that they can go dip into, which also isn't the case. And so it's really then starting to understand each other and having a common understanding. What I really like about Peter's book is it takes that, well, my way is better than your way. It takes that out, and all of a sudden you've got a third party and a third party methodology that's proven, where both parties can then come together and actually say, we're gonna follow the book, right? We're gonna follow the advice in the book, and it takes a lot of this, who's on first and what's on second power struggle out of the equation. And it solves today's problems by let's getting on the same page with language. Let's get on the same page with building a common understanding. Let's build some small processes where we both have a voice in it. And to Warren's point about that longer term, because this isn't like this is not a one and done. And every time you change a marketing person or a customer success person or a salesperson, that person needs to be indoctrinated into this mindset and into this process. So the book becomes this long-term guide to make sure that the DNA doesn't revert back to the way it was, and as the company grows, it can accommodate for that. So I wish Peter had written this book a long time ago. It would have made my life a whole lot easier when I was doing this, for public and private companies. I had to do it the hard way.
Yeah, so true about what you're saying in terms of, having that roadmap, having that guide, and having the long-term mindset, which Warren talked about as well. It's prevention's better than cure. So, let's have the right foundations before things start to get complex or problematic. So great advice there. We're now going to go over to some live questions from the audience. We have a question here from Maya, and the question here is, what are the main barriers that teams and leaders put up when trying to implement this methodology? And how would you recommend, we can overcome those sorts of barriers? Any thoughts from everyone?
Yeah, I'd love to answer that question. So, the resistance that we see from clients to this process is myopia, right? I mean, look, you've got companies, even large companies, small companies, the size is not an issue. What it really is most of the time companies are under pressure to grow their businesses and drive revenue. And the myopic focus on that is so difficult that working on the business is time away from working in the business, okay? And if I have to do the process that Peter's proposing, which is a brilliant idea, it really does require kind of putting down the tennis racket, stop playing for a little while, and then learning a little bit. And it's very, very difficult to tear executives away from things that they feel might impact revenue, particularly when they're people who are likely mostly very involved in the day-to-day work, which maybe they shouldn't be. So I think there's a bit of that. There's a bit of this sort of knee-jerk reaction to distancing themselves from having direct impact on the outcomes. And the other part of it too, it's the way that companies are financed today. So if I'm a company that I've been funded through a seed round or an A round or a B round, those investment rounds, they come with expectations. And those expectations are usually not realistic, right? Usually it's top-down projections that push cultures of companies to do things. And most of the time what's ended up happening is companies are chasing outcomes that are either unachievable or they don't make any sense, or they're driven by non-realistic or grounded data from customers. And it's very hard to get a company in that modality to stop and do a little bit work on their business, because if 1 week or a quarter is off, it can make a big impact on a business. And the fear of that happening, usually on the behalf of the relationship between a board and a CEO, is so difficult that getting a CEO to pull away, they'd much rather, like I think it was Chris said, they'd much rather buy a software program that they think will plug a hole, right? And spend a lot of money on a crappy software program that doesn't make any sense, because they think that it's going to solve a problem, and actually sitting down and doing some hard work and really looking at things in a meaningful way, which is why I think the software business is a good business to be in personally. It's a really good business. There's a real addiction out there for it, and people are willing to buy it. And so I think the problem is getting customers to really do the hard work is not easy. It takes smart people to figure out how to get people to do that.
Just to quickly jump on that, Warren, I think that's spot on. I mean, number one, the goals aren't aligned. I think Christine said it earlier, the goals aren't aligned. So marketing is, has goals of this, what is a lead, what are your commissions versus sales? And then second is timing. There are so many pressures to get revenue, to get the bottom line, and alignment isn't easy. It takes time. It takes a strong leader and everyone within that organization to come together and go, it's going to take more time up front to get things done, but you're going to get it 100, 200, 300 fold going down the track. But Band-Aid fixes are what people and leaders want because of the profitability, the revenue. Let's get the bottom line. Let's get that dollar, let's get that revenue in and let's hit that target. But in my experience, taking that time up front, you're going to have the organization go along with you and that customer impact for a sustainable, profitable organization, as opposed to, as Warren was saying, a knee-jerk reaction. This isn't working. Let's go look at this. This isn't working. Let's drop this. Let's try this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Heather. Very, very true. We do have a question from Jake in the audience. So Jake, did you want to perhaps unmute and share what your thoughts are and what you might want to ask the panelists? I think Jake might be something happening with his audio, so we can't really hear Jake at the moment.
There you go.
Hi, Jake.
I talk about technology. I have a mic for this, a camera, so it's I'll despair it. But I'm on the front lines of sales, and the reason why I am asking the question is because I find this sales methodology to be new aged, and I've learned Sandler sales, and I know that every company that I had worked for in the past, they sent me off to go get certified. And I thought that was even neat. However, I was told from the executive team to go get this certification in sales, okay? Today, it seems almost as if no one has answers, and what our CEOs and our executive teams don't know, they don't know by no fault of their own, because there's a pandemic out there and they're worried about other things. I feel, okay? I might be wrong. I know sales is what they want, but what I've been told is they want to hold on to their book of business, okay? And that is most important. So what would you say to a gentleman like me that believes in the sales methodology and wants to approach a C-level executive with this pitch of selling this idea? Because I feel as if they don't want to, they're over inundated with too much already, where they don't want to hear about something like this, because this is one of many they could say, or I don't know what the answer could be that they could respond with. But what I'm trying to, I guess my question is, I know that would be an issue with a couple of the companies that I've worked for in the past, large, small, you name it. I'm looking for, I guess what I'm looking for is the best way to, I don't want to sell it, because you're not selling it. It sells itself, right? If they see it, they see it, and they'll see the value. But to get it in front of them today is a big deal. And that's what I'm looking for. I guess that's what I'm looking for. Is
Okay, thanks, Jake. I might take that. I try to have a go at this answer. So as Warren and Christine have said, that there's a lot of short-termism out there, like end of the month, end of the quarter right now. When times are good, nobody wants to change the model because it's working. When times are not good, nobody wants to change the model in case it gets worse, right? So there's a lot of inertia out there, as Jake was suggesting, that stops you from doing something different. But I reckon that the pandemic itself is a catalyst for change. You know, you may as well do something different right now because whatever you did in 2017, 18, and 19 is no longer working, right? So the answer, Jake, is that a single salesperson cannot change the whole organization. You know, and as the saying goes, culture eats strategy for breakfast. It really is a cultural problem, even though I don't like to say that out loud because people run screaming, you know, fearful of fuzzy HR stuff instead of bringing home the bacon and having the revenue by the end of the month. But now is the time to actually take toll of what you're doing and recognizing that the environment has changed, and that gives you an opportunity to change your organization as well, because you can hit the pause button with impunity, and you can remodel your organization and start from, not from scratch, but start to change the way we do things around here, which is what culture is. Right.
Great.
And
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
and I will in a minute talk about exactly how that works in terms of taking the baby steps and starting the conversation internally.
I was going to say, just really quickly, you can use pilots as well. Australia is a really good country to do pilots for the rest of the world. If you have a small department, you know, bring it up to your leader in your marketing department and see if that's just something that you can do on a small scale, prove out, and then extend.
Fabulous idea, Heather. That's great. We have a question for Doug. And the question relates to something obviously you're very passionate about, Doug. It's really around content for clients. And that seems to be one of the biggest disconnects between sales and marketing. So do you have any practical advice on how customers can actually address this challenge around content misalignment? Is there something we can do straight away, like, you know, actionable stuff, you know, right here, right now?
Yeah, I think, you know, the term, the virtuous cycle and the description of the virtuous cycle is really about listening and observing what's going on. And I think the practical advice that I would start with from a simple perspective is really try to observe and get data on what's actually being used and what's working when it comes to content. You know, buyers are more educated than they've ever been, and they're getting further through the sales cycle without you than they ever have before. And so, you know, while you want to continue to supply them information along the buyer journey before they contact you, once they do contact you, my view of the world is you win when you can supply them the right information that they need at the right time, you know, where they don't have to deviate. They don't have to back up and say, okay, I already know all these things. You know, you can quickly sync up with them, take advantage of all that data that you're collecting, and be able to very quickly respond with the right information. And that takes the form of content. So understanding what's going on translates into listening, marketing, listening to the sellers, watching the sellers, and observing, you know, what is actually being needed, you know, as they're getting to specific and unique selling situations and places along the buyer's journey. So many companies, some of the ones I referenced earlier, you know, they had places where they stored content. Of course, everyone has something, right? But very few of them provide you much in the way of visibility about what's actually being used and what's performing and what's effective. And that is the most valuable part of the technology stack, I think, the missing link. And if you don't have it now, the best substitute you have is get out there if you're marketing and talk to sellers and listen to what they're saying, and not what you want to hear, but listen to what they're actually saying and try to understand how you can get content to map up. And then get technology to help you as you go forward to actually observe what's happening and what's being effective.
Yeah, that is so true, Doug. And if I may add to build on what you just said, I think one of the opportunities for greater alignment is also marketing providing some parameters and, you know, templates using technology to be able to give the sellers that self-serve capability so they can customize their own materials, but within the guardrails of, you know, what's compliant with brand guidelines, you know, what's aligned to messaging for the company. So I think there are opportunities there to utilize tools and technology to automate that process of customer personalization for the content. So in that way, there's alignment throughout the entire journey for the buyer, whether they're coming out of a marketing campaign into, connecting with sales reps, they are having a very consistent experience.
Yeah, I think there's lots of technology. Certainly, that's what we built our company on. But I think to Warren's earlier point as well, though, it's not all about technology. It's really the mindset that says I need to observe, I need to learn, I need to improve, the virtuous cycle, and that the information's got to flow, kind of all around that. And technology can help absolutely on that journey.
Fantastic.
And if you look at EMEA and APAC, it gets more complex with the more countries, the different languages, the different cultures. So it becomes much more important for marketing and sales to work together.
Yeah, industry, specific language and nuances, absolutely. The complexity, I have an idea that we talk to our customers about sometimes, a complexity score, and it kind of reflects a lot of those variables that you're talking about, Heather. And it generally, I use it as a shock tool when I show it to people and say, here's your complexity as we understand it. And when you present it to them that way, they're usually just blown away. They don't understand. It's like the $1 trillion number, right? They don't really understand what they're dealing with, and it helps reset the way they think about it. But language, nuance, vertical nuance, all of those things really go, really spiral out of control quickly.
Yeah. That's right. Well, in the interest of time, we're going to go back over to Peter, who's going to talk us through, a special offer that he's providing to the audience. And over to you, Peter.
Okay, thanks, Iris, and thanks everybody on the panel. You did an awesome job talking about how the book is relevant to organizations large and small and in multiple jurisdictions and countries. So I just want to not only talk about the offer, I'll just try to do this in 3 minutes, but bear with me if I spend 5. The thing that is the hardest thing to do in any organization is actually to get the dialogue started about, how can we do better? Because you want to get away from, your leads are crap, you guys are, your salespeople are lazy, and you want to talk about how could we do better? And the hardest thing is to actually get that conversation started, and this is what the giveaway is about, because it's a really neat way to not come in from the outside and say, let me show you how you do it right because you're doing it wrong, but to actually get people to realize that they can be part of the solution themselves. So here it is. So the way to Smarketing Nirvana is actually 5 steps. And the 5 steps are on the screen there, where we take a snapshot of the organization and give you your own Smarketing score, which I call Pulse of Our Business. And I'm going to give 5 of these away to qualified parties. So it's not the first 5 to put the hand up and say, I want this. I want you to contact me and we'll have a conversation about whether it's suitable for you, how we can make it useful for you, and how we can get maximum value for you from this exercise. And then I'll select 5 organizations that can roll this out free of charge. It's basically I'm giving away $10,000 worth of services, and I'd like you to put your hand up and talk to me about afterwards offline, and in terms of how useful this would be for you. The second step is then that we take that one step further and we interview your people and get their sentiment, because what we get from those conversations is super awesome, because the people at the coalface for the first time are being listened to, and they can put their ideas and their solutions forward. And that's gold for any organization, because you very rarely get those voices coming forward. In step 3, we do the same thing with the customers. And you wouldn't believe what feedback you're getting when you send a neutral party like Switzerland into the organization and say, what do you think of this providers, this vendors, this sellers, sales and marketing messaging, and how it resonates with you. Taking all that information together and then creating a joint action plan that actually shows the people that internally in the organization and the customers that they've been listened to, and making them part of the solution and bringing their ideas to the fore and say, could this be part of our plan? Because once everybody's agreed on the plan, then number 5 becomes really easy, the implementation. So we don't have to have a management committee that makes a decision and then pushes it down through the organization. We can actually go the other way, get everybody agree on that it's a good idea, how we're going to go about it and what the expected outcomes are, and then deliver it. And the delivery becomes practically the easiest part. So I'm going to give 5 of these things away, and I'm just going to show you exactly what you're getting. So here's a real client example in terms of what the actual outcomes were in doing this exercise with the real client. And I'm just speeding it up in the interest of time. So on the top right there, you can see the Smarketing scores, the maturity stages. So you've got the silo mindset where they operate in separate silos but don't talk to each other. Process mindset where they've bridged the gap with some technology and processes. Or then the collaboration mindset, which is the highest level of maturity, where they're actually, like yin and yang working together. What you're going to get is your overall Smarketing score for the organization, and you can see which one of those 3 maturity stages your organization is in. You will also get the average scores between the marketing team and the sales team, and then it gets really interesting when you look at the individual person and individual person's high score and low score. So in this particular example, we had somebody from marketing say we're aligned 78 out of 100. And somebody from sales agrees and says we're 80 out of 100. But we've got somebody else in marketing saying, no, we're only aligned 65. And this particular salesperson said, no, we're only aligned 20 to 20 out of 100. Which means that these 2 people here have formed some sort of bond, some sort of connection between the 2 departments that is at an interpersonal level, not an organizational level. It's not systemic. Whereas these 2 people here probably don't talk to each other much at all, and they don't get the benefit of these other 2 people. So you can see immediately that there is a need in the organization for collaboration, but it's being left to individuals to develop their own relationships there. The other thing I just want to show quickly is you can get the specific wish lists of people within the marketing and the sales teams saying, why can't we do this together, right? So for example, here's the top 5 opportunities that marketing said they wanted from this exercise, and what sales said they wanted from this exercise. And you can say, oh, well, it makes sense that marketing develops a better understanding of what marketing material is being used by the high-performing salespeople, because then they can create more of that, and the salespeople can learn how to use the marketing material better to be as good as the high performers. Or why wouldn't sales consult with marketing prior to setting sales targets in the sense of saying to marketing, how can you help us achieve those goals? So it's not rocket science, it's pretty commonsensical, but by drawing out these particular points, starts a dialogue within the organization that's really, really healthy. And so I want to encourage you to reach out to me, and here's my contact details on the screen, to have a conversation with me about your organization, how this Pulse of the Business exercise could help your organization. I'm going to give 5 of those things away to help you get the conversation started and get Smarketing into your organization. Over to you, Iris.
Thank you so much, Peter, and would like to thank all of the panelists here today for your insights and your feedback, and also the audience who've spent time with us. So thank you all, and we'll be sending out the recording for this session to everyone and the slides as well. Thanks for joining. Have a lovely day.